Thanksgiving used to be awesome. Imagine a cozy house, the smell of turkeys and pies filling each room. It was awesome. But when I was 16, something went down during Thanksgiving that still freaks me out. High school sucked that year, and not because of the academics. After some messy drama, I found myself in the outs. Getting picked on became part of the daily routine, so you can bet I was counting the days down to Thanksgiving. I needed a break, and I was desperate for some of Grandma's home-cooked comfort food and a pause from the high school horror show. I was also hoping to catch up with my dad. He was always swamped, working late at his family law office. We barely talked, and I had stuff on my mind I needed to hash out with him. The homework and the bullying were just too much, and I needed my dad to help me figure things out. But that Thanksgiving, instead of the peace and quiet that I was hoping for, something happened that turned my safe haven into the setting of nightmares. We were at my grandma's house when all hell broke loose. Our family isn't huge or anything. It's just us. Me and my little sis, our parents, my aunt and uncle, a couple of cousins, and grandma. A nice small gathering. The guys, including me, were up to our usual pre-dinner mischief, sneaking bits of the turkey when we thought no one was looking. It was like this little tradition, a game almost. Mom hated it, always scolding us for ruining our appetites. But Grandma was a partner in crime, always slipping me an extra piece with a sly wink. We had just settled around the dining table, the room warm with the buzz of light conversation and the golden glow of the chandelier. Dad was in the middle of saying grace, a moment where time seemed to pause, where everything was perfect. That is, until a loud bang at the front door shattered the moment. Dad's prayer got cut off. He wrapped it up with a quick, "Amen." I guess he didn't want to leave God hanging. He and my uncle bolted to the living room window next to the front door to check out the commotion. A guy was outside, losing his mind, waving a baseball bat around like a madman.
"Come out, you coward! You think you can do this to me and get away with it? Where is she?"
I'd never seen Dad so pale. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Every one of us was holding our breath, waiting for what would happen next. Bang! Bang! The sharp, piercing noise of the bat against the front door echoed through the house again, each strike accompanied by the man's wild screams of frustration. Just when it felt like the door would give in, just when the terror reached its peak, the banging stopped. We watched him storm off to his car, the night swallowing him whole. Uncle Drew was the first to snap out of the shock. He dashed into the kitchen and came back armed with a large knife and Grandma's stone rolling pin, still speckled with bits of pie crust and flour. He was ready for a fight. But Dad, he just stood there, staring at the door, silent. It was like he was frozen, the color drained from his face. I'd never seen him like this, so helpless. The Dad I knew was a rock, but this guy outside, he turned Dad into a statue. The silence was a living thing, oppressive and thick, wrapping its icy fingers around each one of us. Every creak of the house, the distant sounds of the night, seemed amplified, echoing the terror that the man had instilled. Mom was on the phone with the police, her voice shaky with a mix of fear and rage. The details were scattered. I heard our address and the mention of a madman with a bat, but my ears were too filled with the pounding of my own heart to take in every word. The heavy silence was almost as unnerving as the chaos before. Every quiet second ticking by felt like the calm before another storm, and I wasn't wrong. He came back. In the dull light from the front porch, his shadow looked all kinds of creepy. This time, he had a raw turkey in a tinfoil tray. My skin crawled. There we were, inside, trying to hold on to some sense of normalcy. And outside, the symbol of our family gathering was about to go up in flames. As he doused the turkey in oil and lighter fluid right there on the lawn, every cherished memory of past Thanksgivings felt like it was being tainted. He struck a match, and as the flames leaped up, casting wild, unpredictable shadows against Grandma's house, it felt like our safe, sacred family space was anything but.
"You think you can burn my life to the ground and get away with it? You're going to burn!"
The man's voice, twisted with rage, resonated with a haunting echo that would linger long after. As the sound of the tires screeching away faded, Dad and Uncle Drew bolted outside, their faces a mix of shock and gutsiness, determined to put out the fire consuming the turkey. They smothered the flames with baking soda, killing the fire's dance. But the dark quiet of the night was a stark reminder. The peace we took for granted was broken. and the safe haven of Grandma's house was violated. The police arrived, and Dad recounted the night's horror, offering the haunting description of the man, his identity an unsettling revelation, the estranged husband of a woman whose divorce Dad was handling. The drive home was nothing like usual. Instead of the laughter and chatter, a heavy silence hung in the car. The whole vibe was just off. Our house didn't feel like the safe, cozy place it used to be. Every room was filled with the echo of that guy's rage and the sight of the flames. I tossed and turned in bed, those horrific images playing on a loop in my head. Sleep was a battle, and when it finally came, it wasn't restful. Then, a light. A creepy, intense glow slipped through my blinds, jerking me out of my messed up dreams into something way worse. Flames were crawling up the front door of our house, and that same damn car from earlier was there, pulling away into the darkness. Fire! I yelled at the top of my lungs, rushing to my parents' room. We scrambled to my sister's room, then out the back, around the side, into the front yard. Dad tried to use the garden hose, but it was no use. The water practically turned to steam before it even hit the flames. Mom dialed 911, her voice shaking. It wasn't long before the fire trucks rolled up, sirens blaring, drowning out the crackling flames. They worked to get the fire under control. The police picked up the guy my dad identified. Turns out he was to be locked behind bars, where his crazed rage couldn't touch us. But even with him locked up, the terror of that night clung to us. Even now, sleep is fleeting. Often I'll wake up to this eerie glow outside my window. Every time, it's his face I see, twisted in a sickening smile amidst the flames. That's when I really wake up, drenched in sweat. The terror just as real as that night. I can't shake it. But Thanksgiving is like a shadow, following me into every restless night, turning every dream into a front row seat to the nightmare that never seems to end.
I went to my grandparents' house for Thanksgiving last year. It was a long-standing family tradition, but last year was different. My grandmother passed away just a month prior, and her favorite holiday was Thanksgiving. She was an excellent cook who collected hundreds of her own recipes, each of which she wrote down and passed on to her children. My mom, aunts, and uncles wanted to host Thanksgiving in Grandma's honor by following all her recipes. I was passing the time on my phone near the kitchen when I heard the first weird thing happen and poked my head in. My mom was trying to preheat the oven for the turkey, but the dial was acting up. Every time she tried to set it to 350, it would slowly turn back down to 325. She did this 10 times, and no matter where she set the dial, it found its way back to 325. That's when she checked the recipe again and realized she had made a mistake reading it. She thought the right temperature was 350, but Grandma specifically wrote down 325. My relatives chalked it up to the ghost of old Grandma watching over them and making sure they got all her recipes right. Later on, my aunt grabbed some oregano, but right before she started sprinkling it into the crock pot, the lid just popped off and all of it spilled onto the floor. A quick check of the recipe revealed that she was supposed to use thyme and not oregano. Grandma saved Thanksgiving once again. At one point, my uncle was trying to peel potatoes with a knife for the mashed potatoes. Grandma didn't have a peeler. She did it the old-fashioned way, and my uncle just couldn't get it. The knife kept slipping right off, but it was razor sharp. Sensing a moment to show off, my stepfather told my mom's brother to step aside and let a real man take care of it. Within 10 seconds, my stepfather sliced his right finger open. It didn't take a genius to conclude that Grandma wanted the potato skins included in her mashed potatoes, and her ghost was making sure it happened. As for myself, I didn't believe any of it. I thought it was a nice game they were all playing to imagine their mother was still around while her passing was fresh. Eventually, however, I got bored and walked away to hang out with my stepsister for a bit before the food was ready. She was the only good thing that came out of my mom and dad getting divorced. I never had siblings before until a few years ago when my mom remarried. I didn't care for my stepdad, but my mom was happy that both their children were getting along like family. I was just glad that I finally had a good friend like her. During the feast, the disturbances kept happening. The lights flickered, a chair moved without anyone touching it, somebody claimed to feel a presence, but by that point it was clear that these were made up by my relatives to keep the bit going. After a while, it felt like the ghost of Grandma gag had run its course, and soon after, the feast was over. Then, the only thing to do was hang out with the family, but honestly, I couldn't wait for everyone to go to bed. When night finally fell, I was stuffed into a small guest bedroom with all my male cousins. I waited a couple of hours, then snuck out and met my stepsister in the laundry room of the basement. Once we locked the door, we could finally be together for the first time in what felt like ages. I know it was wrong. We both knew it was wrong, but it just felt so right to hold her hand and to hug her and never let go. I've been waiting to do that again for so long.
Me too.
Do you think anybody heard you sneak out?
Nope. What about you?
Nope.
Good.
Yeah, that's good. We leaned in for a kiss, but then we were less than an inch from each other when out of nowhere the washer and dryer turned on. We both freaked out, but that was only the beginning. The spinning in the machines quickly turned violent, causing them to shake around like crazy. Seconds later, the dryer burst into flames right before our eyes. I tried to look for a fire extinguisher or something to put out the fire, but I couldn't find anything. When I looked back, the inferno was already shooting up to the ceiling and scorching it. By then, it became obvious that it was time to go. We ran to the door and unlocked it, but when I tried to open it, I couldn't. It was stuck somehow. My stepsister couldn't get it open either. It was like another invisible lock had been thrown on the other side. Our last resort was to bang on the door and call for help, screaming and begging for someone to wake up and save us. But the fire was growing fast. Before long, the room was filling up with black smoke, suffocating us. We collapsed to the ground to escape it and kept screaming and banging on the door. The heat was immense. The smoke just got thicker and thicker until I passed out. The last sensation I felt was my body burning. I woke up in a stretcher with an oxygen mask on my face, being wheeled away from the house, which was now engulfed in flames. My stepfather was walking next to me. He was burned, but not as bad as I was. He told me he was the one who found us in the basement and pulled us out moments before it was too late. Then, he told me my grandfather didn't make it out in time, although that didn't seem to be the reason he looked so mad at me. Listen to me. I know you didn't start that fire, but I also know it's not a mystery why you two were down there. The whole family knows now. I hope you're ready for that. You should know better than to sin in your grandmother's house when you know she's watching. Once I got out of the hospital, nothing was the same with my family. Our family's Thanksgiving celebrations have always been warm and friendly occasions. The aroma of a perfectly roasted turkey permeated the room as we huddled around the table, telling jokes and laughing. However, this year was different, adding a sinister twist to our beloved tradition that still gives me chills. Like any other holiday, we had made the usual preparations. My mom spent hours carefully seasoning and basting the turkey. My dad made his renowned mashed potatoes, and my sister and I carefully set the table. Even my brother John joined in, albeit with an uncharacteristically eerie enthusiasm. My family and I smiled and gave each other appreciative looks as we gathered around the lovely table. John, the family oddball, was well known for his eccentricities, but today he seemed especially off, his eyes darting about the room, and a sinister smile played across his lips, as though he was hiding something too delicious to keep hidden. I attempted to relieve the tension by asking, "John, what's so funny?" I shivered in response to his laugh. "Oh, well, you'll find out soon enough," he said. I scowled as my sister, parents, and I exchanged worried looks. Beyond John's peculiar behavior, there was something wrong. I couldn't help but think that he might be pulling another one of his notorious practical jokes. The aroma of the golden brown skin and savory spices filled the room as my mom started to carve the turkey. My stomach grumbled in anticipation of the moment we had all been waiting for. But as soon as the first bite entered my mouth, I noticed a strange metallic taste. I cast a quick glance around the table and noticed that my family members shared the same expressions of discomfort. My father's voice quivered in worry as he asked, "John, did you do something to the turkey?" John laughed again, startling all of us. "Oh, don't worry, I just added a small surprise. You're gonna adore it." With a mixture of fear and disgust on her face, my sister pushed her plate aside.
What did you put in it, John?
My heart sank as I noticed his eyes glistening with madness, as his laughter turned into manic giggles. With a sly grin on his face, he admitted, "Ratsbane." A stunned silence engulfed the space. John had just acknowledged sprinkling our prized Thanksgiving turkey with ratsbane, a lethal poison. I panicked as soon as I realized how serious the circumstance was. Help was urgently needed. John lunged across the table, snatching my mother's phone out of her hand as she attempted to dial 911. His eyes, once so familiar, were now crazed and insane. With words laced with madness, he hissed, "Nobody's leaving until you finish your meal." My heart tightened with fear as I became aware of the severity of my brother's psychosis. He had always been odd, but this was much darker. My family's lives were in danger because we were entrapped. I lunged at John in an effort to wrestle the poison away from him as desperation overcame me. My father and sister also entered the battle, but John's strength seemed out of the ordinary. He fought back with such a ferocity that it terrified us to our core. He screamed, his voice a chilling blend of rage and madness.
Finish your meal!
However, there was no chance that we would voluntarily eat the poisoned turkey. We fought John with all our might until we gained the upper hand and took the tainted meat away from his grasp. During the ensuing chaos, I called 911 and explained the situation in a shaken voice. The ambulance rushed up, its siren piercing the tension, and our Thanksgiving nightmare began. Paramedics took us to the hospital where we underwent gastric lavage to purge the poison from our systems. Despite being a terrifying and grueling experience, it ultimately saved our lives. As we lay in our hospital beds, weak but alive, we pondered what had driven John to commit such a heinous act. Was it his deteriorating mental state, an evil desire for power, or something even more evil hidden beneath the surface? There was no doubt in our minds now that our Thanksgiving had turned into a nightmare. The taste of that poisoned turkey haunted our dreams, reminding us of my brother's brief encounter with the dark side. We ultimately made it through Thanksgiving, but not without significant emotional scars. It was a lesson learned the hard way that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we least expect. The bond we once had with John was forever shattered, replaced by fear and a haunting question. What other horrors lay hidden behind the facade of our loved ones?